Hello, everyone. Welcome to Better Breath Support. Here's how. This is a webinar with me, Elissa Weinzimmer. I am your host this evening. I'm a vocal health educator, a presence coach, and the founder of Voice-Body Connection. I have this crazy theory that our voices and our bodies are connected, hence the name of my business. And I'm here today to share with you one of my favorite topics tonight about breath support. Now, I teach these free webinars every 6 months as a launch to when I'm doing another round of online classes. It's something I look forward to so much, to get to be here with you and just choose a favorite topic and talk about it. And it seems that this one was very popular, that a lot of people relate to this idea of having better breath support and talking about how it really works. So today, we're gonna really dive into the mechanics of how breath support works. What is one of the common things, common misconceptions that we have that keeps us stuck and not realizing that our breath support is actually working against us? And how do we understand exactly what needs to work and what doesn't need to work so that we can do the work that's necessary and release any excess tension? Because really, long story short with our voice is that when we have excess tension, it's going to strangle or dampen the sound of our voice, right? So this is our goal for today. This is my goal for you. And that's what we'll do. Now, let me start by also sharing a little bit about me and who I am and where I come from and why I'm here sharing this stuff with you. So growing up, I was a total musical theater kid. And in fact, I actually have this specific memory of being in the Contra Costa Children's Choir in the East Bay of San Francisco, where I grew up. And I remember, I think it was the choir director's daughter came in to do a special class with us about breath support. And I remember her, now I'm sitting in a loud chair, so pardon me when there's loud noises, but I remember her putting her hands on her rib cage and putting her hands on her belly and saying something about rib cage, belly, etc. And I remember noting at the time, there must have been some part of myself that knew I was going to be really interested in all of this. I remember noting that I should pay attention and this was important. And then I remember getting really confused about exactly what she had said. I was like, so what's supposed to do what? What's supposed to do what? I'm confused. It took me a lot of years to untangle that. And in fact, I had to go through a really surprising and somewhat traumatic experience to come back around to this question. And it was that, fast forward, I was a senior at USC, at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. If you picture the movie Pitch Perfect, that was kind of my life. I was singing in an a cappella group. I was belting What a Feeling from Flashdance, aka shouting What a Feeling from Flashdance as my solo. I was drinking more alcohol than I had prior to that moment because it was my final semester of senior year and I wanted to make sure that I had my college experience. And I was also recovering from mono. Smarter people might have not done what I did, but the combination of all those things was that I got severe acid reflux and had a vocal hemorrhage. And so I wound up at the ear, nose, and throat doctor's office the week after this a cappella retreat weekend that we had. And they said, you know, there are signs of trauma on your vocal cords. They couldn't really tell me anything definitively. I was really confused about why my vocal cords looked fine, aside from the reflux, but why I was having this extreme voice loss, like couldn't talk, hurt to speak, could barely whisper. And so went to speech therapy, ultimately started studying a technique called Fitzmaurice voice work, which I'm now certified in. And then very ultimately, wound up in Edmonton, Alberta, getting a master's degree in theater voice pedagogy. And now I'm based here in New York City, where I'm coming to you from. And I teach online and in person. I teach people how their voices work and how we can use them better. So that's my story. That's why I'm here now. And really getting down to understanding breath support, and especially for me, who was, you know, sort of the triple threat musical theater girl, if you will, also very into dancing, getting really locked up with my rib cage in ballet for many years. It was really important. I had to understand how things worked to untangle a lot of excess habitual tension in order to really support my voice. So that is my story. And now I want to hear a little bit about you. We've got plenty of people on the line here, 33 at the moment, which is a really, by the way, good percentage out of everyone who signed up. I know it's hard to show up in person, so thank you for being here. I'm going to launch, I just think this is always so fun, on Zoom we have a poll. So I'm going to launch a poll, and I hope that I've given you a choice of who you are. The poll is, who's here? Are you a singer? Are you an actor? Are you a voiceover? Are you a voice teacher of any kind, whether it's dialects, whether it's singing, etc.? Are you a public speaker, or are you something else? And if you're something else, if you're other, feel free to type into the chat box and tell me what you are. You can be a dog trainer. That would be fabulous. I'd love to hear about it. I'm sure some of us have lots of other second things that we do that are awesome. Great. Okay, so as the numbers are coming in, and keep going, we've got, okay, the numbers are coming in as we speak. We have a lot of singers, 50% of us are singers. Oh, the number's climbing. A lot of actors, 30% actors, 29% actors. Voice-over actors, we've got 23%, awesome. Voice teachers of any kind, 45%, awesome. Hello, fellow voice teachers, glad to have you here, really honored. And public speakers, 3%. Okay, I bet more of you are public speakers than that. We've got a speech pathologist on the line, fabulous, awesome, darling, you're right. I should give you your own category besides voice teacher. And a live training coach via webinars. Jay, nice to meet you, that's fabulous. And listening on behalf of a friend who's a fitness instructor. Yes, I'm starting to work with a lot of fitness instructors right now too, because, oh my goodness, they lose their voices, right? And a speech pathologist again, awesome. Thank you guys for being here and joining me. I'm gonna go ahead and end this poll. Thank you for voting. Apologies if there's loud noises coming from outside. Okay, so as I mentioned, this webinar is a launch for my online courses that I teach every 6 months. And starting next week, I'm teaching around of how your voice works, which is my class about the anatomy and mechanics of the voice. A lot of what we're talking about today comes from how your voice works, and we go more deeply in that class. I specifically gear that class towards voice teachers and also singers and voice geeks. If you're really curious about the deepest stuff I have to offer about your voice, it's in that class. And then also next week, I'm launching Vocal Health for VOs, which is a shorter workshop where we specifically focus on vocal health for voiceover actors. So I'll tell you more about all the class stuff later. So hang tight about that, but just know that if the content tonight is really valuable to you and you want more, there's gonna be an opportunity for that. Okay, so what is breath support? Now, I sent you guys my breath support cheat sheet, and to a large degree, what we're gonna be doing is going more deeply into all of the content that is on that cheat sheet. So let me start with the question of what is breath support? Because I think that sometimes we voice teachers throw around this terminology without getting really clear with our students about exactly what we mean by breath support. So I like to define breath support as when we are using the musculature of the entire torso, which is really where the respiratory system is housed, when we're using the musculature of the entire torso to support the flow of air up through the vocal cords folds. Vocal cords and folds is synonymous terms. Folds is the more technical scientific term. So in other words, we are supporting the flow of air from the lungs up through the windpipe, the trachea, through the vocal cords, which the air sets them into motion, and then that sound bounces around inside the vocal tract and comes out as sound. But also really from a base level of our torso, we are actually supporting the flow of energy up and out. And this answers that first thing that I promised you, which is this common misconception that a lot of us unconsciously have about how our voice works that sabotages our breath support. And it's this: our voice travels up and out. As soon as I say that to you, you probably intuitively go, yeah, that's right, Elissa, our voice does travel up and out, absolutely, right? But the thing is, sometimes unconsciously, we're stuck in a pattern where we're trying to squeeze in and push down to get our voice out. Let me explain why. It's because that pattern is really familiar to us as humans. We squeeze in and push down to get solids and liquids out of our body, don't we? Right? We squeeze in and push down to get solids and liquids out of our body. But that's not the way that air flows. Air, breath, voice, sound, this one's fun, emotion, travel up and out of us. They can't get out in a downward direction, right? I often use the metaphor of a toothpaste tube, and I think I actually brought my toothpaste tube today because visuals are always fun, right? So you guys can now see my my cool Ayurvedic toothpaste that I have, if I can find it down at the bottom of my purse. Okay, so here's my Ayurvedic toothpaste tube. Yay, Oromer. It's made in India. Okay, so if you squeeze a toothpaste tube in the middle, do you see how it bulges? Some of the toothpaste goes down, some of the toothpaste goes up, right? If this were open, I'm not gonna waste my toothpaste right now, but if this were open, the toothpaste that went up would squirt out and be usable to me. Granted, it might come out faster than I can actually use toothpaste, but go with me for the sake of metaphor. And the toothpaste that's down here is now stuck, right? I have to do more work later to squeeze that toothpaste back up along the tube. Ladies and gents, this is why your spouses get frustrated with you when you squeeze the toothpaste tube in the middle. Our body is really similar. When we squeeze in the middle, some of the stuff goes down, some of the stuff goes up. The stuff that goes down is stuck until we do more work. This actually works on an energetic level too. So what is breath support? Breath support is supporting from the bottom up. So all of the energy, all of the flow, all of the toothpaste goes in an upward direction. Does this make sense, you guys? Feel free to type in the chat box and tell me if this is making sense. It's always nice to hear from you, since I'm the one doing the talking right now. So when we squeeze in the middle of the tube, which could be our throat, which could be our rib cage, when we squeeze somewhere in the middle, we are energetically sending some of the flow of energy down and some of the flow of energy up, instead of all of the flow of energy up and out. We want to send all of the flow of energy up and out. Yeah, I got a yes. Awesome. This is making sense. Okay. So next thing. Oh, yay, I'm glad I have another toothpaste tube metaphor user. That's awesome, Luann. Okay, great. So next thing. Now, we talk about the diaphragm in relationship to breathing, right? And I actually did a full webinar, which you can look up on YouTube, specifically about the diaphragm. And so now we're going to talk about the diaphragm as well, because it's very relevant. So I'm going to share my screen with you and bring up this picture that you had in the breath support cheat sheet. So this is what our diaphragm looks like, my friends, right? And now here's a couple things to know about your diaphragm. Your diaphragm is muscle. It is essentially a sheet of muscle that connects around the base of the ribs and goes all the way around to the spine. So if we were to trace this on our body, we would put our hands at the base of our rib cage, right in the solar plexus. Start there and just try this with me. And then just walk your hands. I'll stand up so you can see me doing this. Walk your hands around along the rib cage, feeling all the way around until you get back to where the spine is. So the line you just traced there is the base of your rib cage. That's where the bottom of your diaphragm is, right? But now the top of your diaphragm is actually quite a bit higher than that. The top of your diaphragm is actually connecting to the base of the lungs and the heart. Do you see how the diaphragm's a little bit lower on the left side? That's because that's where your heart is, right? So the top of the diaphragm actually comes up right about to the nipple line on men or women who are very perky, right? So it actually comes right about up to the 5th rib. It's quite high. So if I show you on my body, I've got that much verticality in my torso that is diaphragm. Crazy, right? We don't think about it this way. A lot of times when I ask a group of students to gesture to their diaphragm, they just go right here and they don't even realize that it goes all the way around, right? But the diaphragm is actually a muscle that bisects the entire torso so that nothing can go through it except for the things that go through 3 tubes in it. Those 3 tubes are blood in, blood out, and food. Notably, None of those tubes is air, right? Now, granted, you could get some air in your esophagus, in your food pipe, and then that would go down into your intestines and you'd experience it as gas. But air, for the sake of breathing, air doesn't go onto the bottom side of the diaphragm. It stays above it in the lungs. Let's actually now look at the diaphragm in context with all of that. So here's this other image that you've seen if you opened up that Better Breath Support cheat sheet, which is, now let's acknowledge that this black line here is the top of the diaphragm. This is how it's often represented in anatomical images. Do know that it wraps around and comes down around all these organs. But essentially, the diaphragm bisects the torso into chest cavity, which is the heart and the lungs, and abdominal cavity, which is all of the visceral organs, including liver, stomach, gallbladder, spleen, pancreas, large and small intestines, etc. So the diaphragm is like a sheet of muscle, and when it contracts, it has a specific movement that we'll do with our hands in just a moment, and when it releases, it goes back to its dome shape. Let's do this movement now of the diaphragm with our hands. So I'm going to stand up again, and I'm going to bring my hands into the sort of diaphragm shape on my body. Do the same thing right along with me. Now, as you inhale, because the rib cage widens, the sides of the diaphragm get wider, and the diaphragm goes down because the lungs are getting full, so it's pressing down into more of a flat shape. And then as you exhale, it goes back to its dome. So this is an inhalation. This is an exhalation. Go ahead and do it with me. This is an inhalation. This is an exhalation. This is an inhalation. This is an exhalation. If this motion is reminding you a little bit of a jellyfish, I think that's a really nice way of thinking about it. I sometimes get groups of people moving around a room doing the jellyfish thing with their whole body, where we're a full body diaphragm. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, right? That's kind of fun. So you can, if you're a teacher, you can do that with a room full of students. It can be a really nice way to embody the movement of the diaphragm. Now, when it's pressing down, when it's going into its flat shape, that is actually the muscles of the diaphragm contracting, right? Because if this is the directionality of the fibers, when those fibers contract, it actually pulls up the sides of the ribs. And also the central tendon is anchored to the heart and the lungs, so it can't go very far down. So the whole diaphragm sort of flattens as it contracts, right? Because it can't really go very far. So mostly the rib swing starts to happen, the ribs start to move. So the contraction of the diaphragm is the inhalation, and the release of the diaphragm is the exhalation. Now, this is where I know I get a little bit controversial, I can't say that word right now, controversial, because a lot of people will argue that the diaphragm does the work of breathing and breath support. It is the main muscle of breath support, and that nothing else really needs to work, that everything else can just take a break. I don't agree, personally. Here's how I like to think about it. The diaphragm is the engine of the car, but you don't steer the car with the engine, do you? You have to have a transmission, and you have to be able to have a wheel and steer the car with the wheel, right? And if you are driving a manual, you have to deal with the whole clutch situation as well, right? So the diaphragm is like the engine. It absolutely is creating the shape change of the breathing, and that's really what breathing is the shape change of the chest and abdominal cavities. But in order to regulate how the shape changes, other things get involved. And those things tend to be the muscles around the torso, including the intercostal muscles, which are in between the ribs. If you've eaten ribs, you know what they look like. And the abdominal muscles, which are the wall around and in front of the abdominal cavity, okay? So those things are involved in breath support as well. And now I'm gonna describe what I believe, and many other people do believe this as well, is the most ideal pattern of breath support for supporting voice and speech. In order to do that, I wanna bring out some of my fun toys. This is a kid's accordion. right? So the thing about an accordion, and unfortunately this isn't a perfect model because it doesn't expand three-dimensionally, which our lungs do, but think of your lungs like the accordion. Literally, as you expand it, the shape changes, but the volume also changes. There's more air going in and then there's air going out. There's literally air coming in and out of the chest cavity where the lungs are as we breathe, right? In 3 dimensions. However, below the diaphragm, the way that that functions is like a water balloon. I promised you water balloons, right? How does a water balloon work? A water balloon can squish around like crazy, but a water balloon does not have a different amount of stuff in it as I squish it around. It is a consistent amount of stuff in there. This is how the abdominal cavity works, like a water balloon. So if I'm just breathing in an everyday way, if I'm not speaking, if I'm not doing voice and speech, then what's going to happen is when I inhale, the diaphragm contracts, the ribs swing open, the intercostal muscles engage to some degree to help that whole action happen and help the rib cage open. And that is the work of the breath. The work is on the inhalation, and then the exhalation will just be an easy recoil where the diaphragm relaxes and everything goes back to normal. In which case, and probably the vocal cords most of the time are just going to be hanging out in the throat, kind of open like this, and air will flow through them, and such is life, and that's that, right? However, if we want to now make a sound that is sustained for a longer period of time, we're going to need some sort of braking mechanism, some sort of mechanism where the air flows through the vocal cords at the ideal amount of pressure to bring the approximated vocal cords. Approximated means they're approximately together. This is the position that they're in when they can start to vibrate, right? That the air pressure can create the aerodynamic effect through the vocal cords of sucking them together, which in fact is what it does, and then bursting them apart, and then sucking them together, and then bursting them apart thousands or hundreds of times per second to create sound waves, right? How do we do that? From the bottom of the toothpaste tube, from the bottom of the water balloon, okay? So imagine that you are holding a water balloon, and I'll do it for you right now. If I am the diaphragm up here, and I press down on the water balloon, and the water balloon also has a spine behind it, so it can't really distend down in that direction, then which way is it gonna go? It's gonna kind of go down and forward. This is why we see bellies move down and forward when we inhale. Now, would it help for me to pull on the water balloon down and forward? No, that would be so silly. It would just create excess tension. So when anyone has told you, if anyone has told you, and I hope they haven't, but if anyone has told you to push your belly out while you breathe in order to help with breath support, no, not helpful, not helpful. And I'm just gonna say that really definitively. I try to be very diplomatic about the way that I offer information, but that's not helpful, okay? So pulling out on the water balloon, not worth your time. However, what is gonna be useful, so the spine's back here, the water balloon distended this way. Okay, now my hand is gonna become not the spine, now it's gonna become the abdominal muscles down at the bottom. If I squeeze the abdominal muscles down at the bottom of the water balloon, what happens? The water balloon distends upward and it supports my diaphragm as it's returning back to its dome shape. It supports as it's returning. I'm just gonna play with this for a minute. Does that make sense? Check in with me again. Tell me how this is going. While you're checking in with me, I'll also share that sometimes I use these little fun toys for this demonstration. They're kind of fun because they're also a little bit more abdominal shaped, right? So for those of you who are teachers, I highly recommend bringing stuff like this into your classroom and letting people feel what it feels like, the difference between something expanding and changing volume and shape and something just changing shape. Yes, you guys say it makes sense. I love it. Fabulous. Okay, accordion and water balloon. So now, you know those Rube Goldberg machines, like the beginning of Back to the Future, right? Where Like the chicken lays the egg and it cracks and then the dominoes go and there's all the different stuff, right? You know those machines that I'm talking about, they're called Rube Goldberg machines, right? So the Rube Goldberg effect of breath support is that when we engage the low abdominal muscles, it supports the distension of the water balloon back up, supporting the movement of the diaphragm back up to its resting shape, but at a pace that is regulating the flow of airflow from the lungs through the windpipe, through the approximated vocal cords, and into the vocal tract, okay? And good, I'm so glad you are liking these visuals, you guys. Please, you can, so just to give credit where credit is due, by the way, my teacher, Leslie Kaminoff, who is a fabulous yoga instructor and anatomy instructor based here in New York, and who ran a place called the Breathing Project for a long time and wrote a book called Yoga Anatomy. He is the person who taught me this. I didn't come up with this. So Leslie is actually a guest instructor in How Your Voice Works in the breathing module. So you can also, if you want to take the class, you can learn from him directly as well. And Gonzo, I'm so glad you just said what you just said, because still trying to feel it, that's exactly the thing. So for those of you who have been following my work for a little bit, one thing that I'm currently studying, my current obsession, if you will, is something called body-mind centering. And body-mind centering is a way of understanding all the different systems of the body using a specific framework where we look at how does it work, and then we embody it, and then we play with it. So I'm using that structure as I teach you right now. That's the structure that I think is most valuable. So herein sort of concludes the talk at you and explain stuff section of things. And now let's play with it. Let's actually do some exercises, okay? So here's the first exercise we're gonna do. Now, those of you who have maybe seen some of my YouTube videos, some of these exercises, all of these exercises, in fact, are on YouTube, but I want to go more deeply into them right now. So let's just kind of draw. Go ahead and stand up so that you can do this with me. Draw the belly area on you. And I think it's probably worth noting in this moment that a lot of us in the culture we live in have a sort of tenuous relationship with our bellies sometimes, if you will. And we gotta get over that as voice users. I think actually there's something very, very important about allowing ourselves to access our guts, both for our voices and our full lives, and really aren't they fully intertwined. So we're about to make friends with our bellies, okay? So this is the base of my rib cage, which is gonna be basically, I mean, the abdominal cavity actually comes all the way up to the top of the diaphragm, so it even comes up inside the rib cage. You may know that on the left side of your rib cage, up inside the rib cage, is your actual stomach. This is not your stomach. This is your stomach. These are your intestines, your guts, right? And then on this side, inside the rib cage, is your liver. Yeah. So the water balloon is actually going all the way up there, and then it's coming all the way down. And if you find the ridges of your pelvis, that's also where the water balloon is resting down below. So we've got a big old, by the way, the official word for the water balloon is peritoneal sac. That's what it's actually anatomically called, okay? So what we're gonna do is actually massage our belly first, get to know it. Because when we massage our belly, we can release it. And only when we release it do we have as much springiness as it wants to have to support our voice, okay? So we're gonna massage our belly. And now let me also share that just like the toothpaste, I take this from Ayurveda. So this comes from Indian medicine that my Ayurveda practitioners who I was working with for my own health taught me belly massage, and I went, oh, we're gonna use this for our voice. This is important, right? So take two hands and turn them into paddles like this, where the fingers are facing down and in, and bring the center of your fingers right to your belly button, okay? Now, I want you to walk about 1 or 2 inches up from there towards your solar plexus, not all the way up into your solar plexus, but about halfway. And I want you to gently press in and do little circles. And you might be like, whoa, this is not comfortable. I don't want to do this, but go with me to the best of your ability, okay? And you may also burp. because these are your intestines, and if there's a little bit of excess air in there, you may need to burp. So let yourself burp if you need to. Now imagine that this is like a clock, and I'm up at 12 o'clock, and down here halfway between my belly button and my pubic bone is 6 o'clock. We're gonna work our way around, okay? So we're gonna go from 12 o'clock, let's see, I'm gonna try to do it the way you're seeing. I actually don't know if the image is reversed. So anyway, go over to your left side to about 10:30, okay? Or I guess maybe that'll be 2:30. Good, a massage there. 1:30. I didn't calculate this ahead of time, you guys. Good. And then go over to the side of the sort of center of the clock of your belly and massage over on the left side. We'll give up the clock numbers and just go ahead with location, okay? And I'm spending about 10, 15 seconds in each spot. I'm gonna go a little bit faster right now just for the interest of time, but I wanna really encourage you to do this exercise on your own and take your time with it. Come down to the spot that's diagonally about halfway between the side and the bottom and massage there. Oh, that spot made me burp today. Good. And then come down to the center. This is gonna be halfway between your belly button and the top of your pubic bone, and massage there. This will be the spot where you'll know if you'll suddenly know if you have a full bladder, right? And there's another burp. And then come up to the spot halfway between the bottom and the other side. And make sure that your body is gentle, released. Your jaw, your tongue is released right now. Check in with your whole body. And then come up to the side and massage. Good, and then halfway between side and top where we started, and massage there. And let that go. Just take a breath for a moment. If that, I'm sure you regulated for yourself if that became overwhelming for you. But go ahead and just take a moment to let your belly settle. You can even put your hands on your belly. I am using my fingertips, Jay. But it's really up to you how you want to get in there. Now, we want to be using gentle pressure, but it is possible for us to really feel the quality of the organs of that tissue in there. So I think fingertips is probably the most helpful and sensitive thing to do. We're going to do just one more step, which is, this is my belly button right here. We're just going to do like really close, like half an inch around the belly button. So half an inch above. And massage, we're going to do 4 spots. And you might find if you have more knots, more uncomfortable places here, half an inch to one side. Half an inch to the bottom. And half an inch to the other side. Ooh, that's where my bubble is in my intestines right now. Good. And then when you're done, just take your hands, jiggle your whole belly around a little bit. Oh, maybe make some sound. Oh. Good. Okay. So now take a moment and just keep your hands on your belly. And just let your belly relax. Let yourself breathe. There is some really amazing and interesting research that says that our belly is our second brain. There's the most neural pathways and I should say nerve endings in our body are up in our brain, but the second most are down in our guts. And if it's the equivalent of like, this is New York City and this is Washington, DC, there's like one single lane in each direction highway between them, which actually would cause huge, massive traffic jams if that were the case in life. And so what this tells us is that if the neural pathways between these two centers are not very robust, then that must mean that they're pretty self-contained, that like this has everything it needs, and this also has everything it needs. So this is a second brain for us, right? So when we tap into the intelligence of our guts, and we do indeed have a lot of language in our culture to talk about the intelligence of our guts, when we tap into the intelligence of our guts, it can be very, very powerful for accessing our full voice. I know it may sound counterintuitive that our guts are part of our voice, but really when you speak from the guts of you, you're sharing your truth, right? So now that we've released our guts, now that we've gotten to know and be friends with our guts, and this is something you can do every day, I highly recommend this exercise. It's actually, Ayurvedically speaking, a fabulous thing to do right before you eat. Because if you can get the air bubbles out of your digestive tract manually, isn't that amazing that that's possible without Tums? If you can get the air bubbles out of your digestive tract manually, then you can digest your food better. So that's initially how it came to me. So now that we have done this belly release, now we can actually start to engage it. We're going to do an exercise that is going to be a little bit more technically engaged than you might necessarily need to do all the time, okay? So go with me in doing something a little bit more technical, because it's going to teach our body the pattern that we want to do on a regular basis. What we're basically doing is reminding our body to squeeze from the bottom of the toothpaste tubes to send all of the energy vocally up and out so that we are able to communicate with more presence and ease, okay? And I call this the shh, let it go exercise. And there was a link to it in the PDF. And so now here's how it's gonna look. So I'll turn sideways so you can see, and I'll hold my shirt a little bit tighter so you can see the difference. So when my belly goes in, I say shh. And you can kind of see how it looks in my body like I'm squeezing the toothpaste tube from the bottom. But then of course, if I don't let go in between, it has nowhere to go for the next shh, right? So the exercise is shh, let go, 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 right? Now, if I were to be squeezing somewhere up higher, shh, let go, shh, let go. Can you even hear how the quality of my sound changes? That's some of that isometric pressure of some of the energy getting pushed down when in fact we want all of it to go up, right? And certainly if I squeeze up here, shh, shh, shh. If we're seeing some sort of contracting, collapsing of the chest, that's definitely not the pattern, and it's not ideal. We want to squeeze from the bottom. Now, let me see what you're saying, Luann, before we continue. Yes, they speak of feeling coming from the gut rather than the heart. You tell your students that thinking their emotions are emanating from the heart is too high. I like that. I like that so much. Yeah, in Chinese medicine, this area is called the dantian, right? And it's the energetic center of the body. The yogic body, for those of you I didn't mention actually that I'm certified in yoga as well, and that it makes its way obviously into my work quite a bit. The yogic center of the body is often thought of to be right where the diaphragm is at the solar plexus. But really most, especially Eastern philosophy, look at this as the center of the body, this whole area, as our intelligence center. Now I'm squeezing slightly below my navel, Allison, great question. So if you take your fingers about 2 inches below your belly button, squeezing at the belly button is still gonna be a little bit too high. And actually, let's go back to some anatomy to answer this question. And then Gonzo, you have the question about the pelvic floor contraction, and that's a great question too. So let me answer both of these questions of a piece. So let's look at by the way, the anatomical artist who made these cute drawings that I'm sharing with you is a girl named Kelly Fry, who helped me animate the How Your Voice Works class. So this is not perfectly anatomically to scale, but it makes the point, and I think it's fabulous. The outermost layer of the abdominal muscles is the rectus abdominis, which is your 6-pack, AKA it's actually an 8-pack. And as I like to say, everyone has it. It just might be obscured by other things, right? Underneath that is the external and internal obliques that crisscross in opposite directions. That is the second layer underneath. And then the deepest layer is the transverse abdominis, which has sideways fibers, okay? So now understanding these 3 layers of muscle helps us understand how we're actually drawing in the low belly on the let it go exercise, because what we actually want to do is use this kind of area right down here. Why? Because if we squeeze way up here, A, it's squeezing the middle of the toothpaste tube, and B, it's going to limit the movement of the rib cage, is really the reason that we don't want to do that. So let me show you on my body, and do this right along with me. So the rectus abdominis has fibers that run up and down, right? This is my sit-up muscle. This is the muscle that if someone were to come to punch me, it would contract to protect my organs. Great, but that's not the shape we want for our voice coming up and out, right? No. The obliques, which crisscross, also energetically are not exactly what we want. Those engage, if you put your hands on the side of your body, Peter Pan style, those engage when we cough or when we laugh. Right? Those engage inwards. But again, we don't want to squeeze quite that high. It's not the bottom of the tube, right? Now the transverse abdominis has sideways fibers, which means that we can squeeze the bottom fibers without implicating the top. Here's an example of how this could work. Imagine that you have a pair of pants that are one size too small, and you're trying to zip them up to make sure that you can get them on, right? So you're pulling in your low belly. Do you feel how your rib cage actually gets bigger to make that happen? Your ribs actually get bigger to allow you, and you pull up. There's an energetic pulling up to try to get into those pants. That's kind of the action we want. Now, in some voice techniques, what people will say is that then is engaging the transverse abdominis and you're not using the other muscular layers. That's impossible and not true. You are using all three layers of the abdominal wall, but if you think about leading with that deepest layer, which is the transverse that has the sideways fibers, that's gonna help you find that action where instead of squeezing like this, which is sort of weird and is gonna cause stuff in the bottom, that's rectus squeezing, or instead of squeezing like this, which is not gonna work either, that's gonna allow you to squeeze like this, which actually works, right? Make sense, you guys? Okay, let's try it in our body. Hands on the low belly again. So we're gonna do 8, let it goes, and we're gonna pulse in with the belly and let it go each time, thinking of our belly massage and that feeling of release we got during our belly massage, okay? So, shh, let go, shh, let go. And my thumbs are at the level of my belly button right now. They're not higher than that, right? So my hands are below my belly button. Shh, let go, shh, let go, shh, let go, shh, let go. 2 more, shh, let go, shh, let go. Now, let's try a voiced sound just for the sake of having some vibration coming through the vocal cords. Let's try the sound, hey. Ready? Here we go. Hey, let go. Hey, hey, let go. Hey, hey. You can try different pitches. Hey, hey, hey. Good. So this exercise, if you add it in early on in your warm-up, or even if you think about it, if you're doing a vocal singing warm-up and you're going, allowing yourself to do that exercise while also thinking of the support of the low abdominal muscles is super, super key. For me especially, and for so many of us, at some point during our vocal training or during the moments that we were told to stop talking by our teachers, our parents, whoever, we started squeezing in and pushing down because we felt that we couldn't let our sound up and out. That habit that we developed for very good reason is now creating isometric drag and pressure on our vocal mechanism. We want to go back to supporting from the guts, letting the work be in the guts, and letting the rest of the body be a conduit for the flow of energy. The most helpful work we can do on the exhalation is to support from the low abdominal muscles by drawing them in at whatever level is necessary. If you're shouting hey, or if you're singing a high note across a huge theater, it's a lot. And if you're just saying, hi Elissa, good to see you, it's very little, maybe hardly at all. The most important work on the exhalation is to draw the low abdominal muscles in. And the most important work on the inhalation is to release and let the breath come back in. Let the recoil happen on the inhalation and let the work happen on the exhalation. This again is 180 degrees different than what we are programmed to do with our bodies. We are programmed to do work on the inhalation to make sure we get the air in and then to release on an exhalation. When we are doing voice and speech, we're doing 180 degrees the opposite pattern. We are doing work on the exhalation, and in order to have any recovery period, we must release on the inhalation, and that's what the belly massage exercise is for when it comes to your guts and your breath support. Okay. We're actually exactly on schedule as far as I'm concerned. I'm gonna open this up to questions very shortly. But before I do, I just wanna give you the information as promised about classes, and then we will go into any Q&A, and I'm happy to stay on the line as long as the Q&A goes within reason, which will definitely wrap up by 9 o'clock, but we could wrap up sooner, but start preparing your questions. And in fact, you can even put them into the Q&A box right now. Do you guys see the Q&A option? You can start typing your questions into the Q&A box. There is the option of either asking a question and just typing it in, or there also is the option where I can actually spotlight you and we can hear your voice or even see you if you'd like to turn on your video. Okay, so start typing in your questions and thinking about that while I give you this little spiel. So here is the deal. I'm teaching 2 classes this fall. How Your Voice Works is a 7-week class that, like I said, is for voice teachers, singers, fellow voice geeks, people who really want to get into the nitty-gritty of this with all 7 steps that I talk about of the voice. Right now we're really talking about breath, but we can also talk about impulse. We can talk about how the body responds to impulse to create sound, how the breath creates the power source and flow, how the sound actually is created at the vocal folds themselves, how resonance is created in the vocal tract, how articulation works with speech sounds, and then how that all adds up to language, okay? So that is the basic curriculum of How Your Voice Works. And it really is about the anatomy, energy, and spirit of the voice, if you will. And this class is pre-recorded, so it's actually available all year long. The regular class is available all year long, pre-recorded for $199 online. But every 6 months, in the fall and in the late spring, I teach around where it is guided and we move through it together, and there's also a weekly class with me to go above and beyond the content of the modules. So that is happening on Tuesday nights, starting November 7th, it's next Tuesday, and it's Tuesday nights until December, I'm looking down at my notes, November 19th, and it's online on Zoom, just like this, except in a regular Zoom room where we can all see each other. So a lot of people get a lot of benefit from getting the chance to come together, ask the questions, have the live class. So if you're interested in joining this time, I would love to have you. It is a really, really powerful way to actually take the time to understand and embody all of this knowledge so that you can bring it into your students, bring it into your own lessons, up-level everything you're doing, and just untangle any confusion and get really crystal clear about how our voices work, right? So the course with the live portion is $299. And then I also am offering a special where if you want to have a private session with me, you can enroll in the live course plus a private session for $399. And I'll say that that's a really good deal because my hourly rate right now for private sessions is $135, but it's actually going up in 2018 anyway. So this is going to be a pretty killer deal. So if you want to work with me in that way, I would love to have you in How Your Voice Works class. That is how Your Voice works. And then the other class that I'm teaching this fall is Vocal Health for VOs. So those of you on the line who are voiceover actors, this is where I get really specific and targeted about what voiceover actors need to know to protect your most important asset, which of course is your voice. Just like, you know, a runner might want to insure their legs, we should be insuring our voices, right? So we're going to go over your vocal health. Again, it happens online on Zoom. It's an action-packed, jam-packed 3-hour workshop that happens in 2 parts on November 8th and 15th. It's from 3 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. EST on those 2 days. And here's the thing about both these classes. I know that you may be like, oh shoot, I can't attend on Tuesday nights or I can't attend on Wednesday afternoons. I do record them just like I record this session right now. Most people are watching this recorded. hello to all you recorded folks. And so it's absolutely fine to register and watch the recording. And you still get entry into, the special community where you can ask me the questions and have special interaction and feedback by taking the class in the live format. So that Vocal Health for VOs class is $99. And here is my special for you for joining me today and being here right now, is that if you use the code FASTACTION20, that's FASTACTION20, and I'll send this to you in the email afterwards. If you use that code before Saturday night at 8 p.m. EST, okay, so Saturday night at 8 p.m. this coming Saturday, if you use it in the next 48 hours, you'll get 20% off of whichever of those two courses you want to enroll in. So that's my offer to you. Thank you for giving your time to this webinar, and I would love to honor that. So if you have any questions about class, you can absolutely let me know as well when we go into this Q&A portion of things. But for now, I will go ahead and launch Q&A. So feel free to be typing those questions in there. And feel free to ask me questions in the chat box too, if you like. I'm seeing actually, Gonzo, I never actually fully looped back around to your pelvic floor contraction question. So there is a concept in yoga called Mula Bandha. Some of you might have heard of this. Mula Bandha is when the pelvic floor muscles, so kind of think of the cradle at the very bottom of the pelvis, when they draw in and up to support the energy upward of the whole torso. Some people feel that Mula Bandha is actually a really useful way to think about breath support as well. Now, if we look back at the Rectus abdominis muscle, and this is a fun fact that I learned from Leslie Kaminoff that is pretty wild to me. The rectus, you can kind of see just by the shape of it, it goes all the way down and inserts right at the pubic bone. And in fact, this is the crazy fact that blew my mind. The rectus abdominis at a certain point right above the pubic bone actually dives deeper than the transverse abdominis, so it becomes the deepest layer of muscle. I think the significance of that is that the directionality of those fibers, and I'll click out of this picture so I can show you what I'm doing with my hand. The directionality of those fibers going down then becomes contiguous with the fibers of the muscle, the cradle of the pelvic floor. So yes, I actually do believe, Gonzo, that a pelvic floor contraction, if it's not overdone, in the same way that we don't want to overdo the abdominal muscle engagement, a pelvic floor contraction can help. Gonzo, do you want to ask anything more about that? Because I can do this, we can use you as an example to promote to panelists, and you can speak. We can probably hear you now. Do you want to talk? Let's see if he says yes. You have to maybe unmute yourself, just so you know. There might be a thing that says mute, and you click on it.
Got it. No, that's perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. So how does that make sense to you with this pelvic floor contraction question?
It makes sense. What I find is it's trying to feel a noticeable level of engagement that low without introducing tension further up.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So that I can feel the engagement down there and I can feel the contraction, but it feels like it does introduce a little tension, a little like throat, top of the rib cage.
Yeah. Okay. That's really interesting because there was another question that came in that I wanted to address from an email question, someone who couldn't be on the webinar. And I'll just kind of, I'll keep you on the line right now because we'll keep having a conversation about this. But Carol wrote, "Hi, Elissa. I'm curious about engaging the lower abdominal muscles. I find that intentionally tensing any of the abdominal muscles creates undue laryngeal constriction. Do you notice this? How do you combat it?" So Carol's noticing what you're noticing, I think, as well, right? Mm-hmm. So here's the thing. There's this really interesting video, and I'll send it in the email when I follow up and send this recording out. There's this video called the Deep Front Line video, which comes from these guys who are cadaver dissectors in the kind of yoga somatic. And I give you fair warning that this video is kind of intense to watch because it is of a cadaver. But what they show us is that there is a continuous muscular and connective tissue connection from the tip of the big toe all the way up through the tip of the tongue. So if you think about muscles in the body as like almost, and apologies to the vegetarians listening right now, but if you think about muscles in the body as like sausages that are in casing, and the casing's tied off, but it's all the connected sausages, you know that image?
Mm-hmm.
Our connective tissue is the casing of the sausages and connects all of the different muscles. So like, it's really a little bit of a fallacy to say that, you know, the rectus abdominis is totally, totally separate from the splenius muscle, right? Which is up in your neck. So the interesting thing about it is that sometimes the tensegrity, and that's a fancy word for like the tension and integrity through the connective tissue, is a little bit intertwined, and there's stuff that we can't untwine or tease apart. But it is possible to tease stuff apart. It is possible to engage the muscles of the low abdomen and not also co-engage the muscles around the larynx. Now, if it is co-engaging, there is a reason for that, because there's connective tissue that connects all the way up through. It goes actually up through the walls of the peritoneal sac, basically up into the diaphragm, up through the all of the like walls of the rib cage and up into the throat. So there is a reason that we would have excess tension, but what we want to do is do something like the belly release exercise, the belly massage exercise, while really, really teaching the muscles up here along the throat, the larynx, the neck to release. And then we want to, having achieved that sensation of release up here, start playing with the engagement of the low abdominal muscles while keeping the release happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a teasing apart process is what it really is.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I guess what I'll say is you're not weird for having that experience. Someone else said literally the same thing, but there is the possibility of teasing things apart.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you for the question. Yeah, absolutely. Always nice to hear someone's voice. So if you guys are willing to have your voice heard, maybe just type in the chat box and let me know, and then I'll know. So, okay, I have Q&A here. Okay, so Grace, you asked, when you did the belly massage, were you just massaging at the level of the belly button and up? Should any points lower than the belly button be massaged? So actually, Grace, I was massaging in a sort of concentric circle around the belly button. So if I stand up and show you, my belly button's right here, and my belly button I'm thinking of as the center of the clock. So 12 o'clock for me is going to be above that, and 6 o'clock for me is going to be below that, halfway between the belly button or navel and the top of the pubic bone, which for me is right about there. So it's right about there, literally where the button of my pants is right now is 6 o'clock for me. Does that make sense, Grace? Type into the chat box and tell me if that is practical to you, if that makes sense to you. And also let me know if you'd like to unmute and just have a conversation, because I would love to. And then you say, Grace, also, when squeezing the water balloon from the bottom, activating the exhale from below the belly button, do you believe in maintaining neutral spine? Ooh, good question. And this is where, Grace, are you cool with me going ahead and hearing your voice? Because I'd love to hear what neutral spine means to you. So let me come on over here and promote you to panelist. You can always say no if you don't want to. Okay, you said yes. Great. So just make sure you unmute. So Grace, what does neutral spine mean to you?
Sorry, it took me a second to unmute.
No problem. Hi.
Hi. So this is, I don't know, this neutral spine concept to me means not assuming that one is posturally correct and has the lumbar arch, not changing that, no tipping in the pelvis related to breathing. And I guess I have a question about this because I learned some things kind of that resonate with what you're saying, from some people that did body mapping work, Alexander body mapping work, Barbara Conable's work and all that. And so I'm familiar, you know, they say that, you know, everything's attaching to the ribs and there is this lengthening and gathering of the spine and, you know, that the curves do change. And then I went to actually the teacher I was working with at the time, who has very good credentials and is obviously in another school, and said, oh no, your spine, you should stay in neutral spine all the time. That's what my osteopath tells me. So what do you think about that?
It's a great question. Thank you for asking it. So let me just stand up to demonstrate a little bit what I think might be excess. So if we draw in the low belly, can everyone see me right now, by the way? Grace, you can see me right now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So if we draw in, and I'll try to get far enough away that you can really see, we draw in the low belly here, what I think would probably be an over-exaggeration would be to go shh, right? And part of the reason that that's problematic is because the chest is also collapsing. So that thing we were talking about where the energy flow, aka the toothpaste, is going up, you're gonna see a teeny little bulge up through the upper torso area when you're truly squeezing energetically from the bottom. So I certainly agree with you and this other person that like over moving the spine to try to help is not going to be helpful. But on the flip side, I actually think that it can be equally harmful to tell someone not to move, because ultimately what that's going to create is rigidity. Our voice needs movement. I mean, literally, if we go to the level of the vocal cords, of the folds, what is actually happening there, vibration is movement, right? So our voice needs the ability to move. And even like, you know, sometimes people will say, don't breathe with the chest, only breathe with the belly. I think that can be problematic too and can create a lot of tension for people in the chest area. So what I ultimately believe is the middle ground between the two extremes you're talking about is, I use the phrase movability, or the word movability. I think that it is very, very important that all of the tissues of our spine, whether it's bony tissue, which is more dense, or whether it's the connective tissue around the muscles, etc., that all of the tissues stay active and dynamic. And the stuff that needs to actually do work, like the low abdominal muscles, that's what we want to be relying on. But everything else is allowed to be responsive, I think. How does that feel? How does that sit with you? And I know that I think this is something you've thought deeply about, so I'd like to hear your feelings.
Yeah, that makes sense. I find that when I'm working with students, I introduce it, and everybody does tend to overdo it first. And I can see how that's problematic. And, you know, certainly you don't want, you know, you need to maintain the integrity of the whole being arranged around the core and not collapsing forward and you know, going into overly Bob Fosse pelvic tilt. But yeah, the idea of, oh no, you must maintain neutral at all else, when all this stuff is attached to the spine and the pelvis and it's all in movement, and there's going to be a ripple effect. It just, that doesn't seem practical either.
Yeah, and in how your voice works, when I talk about what's going on with the body, my theory around neutral, and that's part of the reason I wanted to ask you your definition of neutral, is that my theory around neutral is that it is a dynamic state. It's not a rigid state. So it really, I think it can be helpful to take, I know it can seem a little bit pedantic sometimes to take the time in a lesson to talk about what neutral even means, but I think that's valuable because a lot of students have assumptions about it, right? And so like to realize that neutral can be a dynamic state and play with that, I think can be really, really helpful. And also, like, I'm thinking to the jellyfish thing I was talking about early on, like getting someone to feel what the movement is of a specific area with their whole body in some sort of goofy, fun way can then be a really nice way to help them go back and then only do that movement in the one area and let everything else just stay free.
Okay.
Yeah, I sort of assume that you're doing this anyway, but I'm just reinforcing you know, the idea of like letting ourselves play with the definition of neutral.
Okay, yeah, great. Then,
Yeah,
great.
Thank you.
I thought of it in terms of balance, but not in terms of what you're saying. So,
Oh, awesome. Okay, good. Yeah, good to have the conversation then.
thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. All right. Gonzo, I see you had another question. I'm having a hard time feeling the low work on the exhalation without introducing tension. Oh, this is the one, into your upper chest and throat. Okay, so we did, I think I answered that, but type to me if you feel that I didn't. And then I've got a question here. Jay, I just saw this. I should have worn workout gear for this webinar. Yeah, totally. I know. I'm wearing my jeans right now, which is not usually what I'm wearing. Hi guys, I'm so sorry. I just got kicked off of the webinar. I'm back. Okay, sorry about that. Thanks for hanging out. I think I might have lost chats. Oh shoot, I think I might have lost chats. I'm so sorry about that. I think the internet went out. I know Luann, you had asked a question. If you remember what your question is, I would love to hear it. And actually it might just be easiest. Let me promote you to panelist and you can ask it out loud if that sounds good. Go ahead and unmute yourself. Luann, are you there? I don't think we can hear you right now. Sorry about that we can't hear you. Go ahead and type into the chat box, even just to let me know that you guys can hear me. You guys can hear me, yeah? Good, okay. Too bad we had internet issues. I actually specifically came to this room because I figured it would be better to be here because I was having internet issues at home. All right, well, Luann, go ahead and type your question, and I'll leave you here just in case we suddenly kick in. Did I miss anyone else's question? I think maybe I have someone with a hand raised. That looks fancy. Maureen, you have your hand raised. I'm gonna promote you to panelist. Go ahead and unmute yourself. And actually, I realize I can probably do it for you. Let's see, can I do that for you? There you go, Maureen, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry, Lisa. I just raised my hand because we lost you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for doing that. You did lose me. I am back. I'm sorry I was gone. Thank you.
But
and actually,
I wanted to tell you the materials that you sent out prior.
Yeah.
I've been testing them out on my student body, and I have to tell you they're a huge hit.
Oh, yay! Thank you for
yes,
sharing.
Just a wonderful, wonderful way to explain the breathing. I've been a vocal teacher and a singing voice specialist for almost 40 years now, and I just love the way that you put those materials together, and I thank you very much for sharing those with us.
My honor and my pleasure. And I have to say, you know, it's hard to know to what degree we all synthesize things because we all gather things from so many different places. But I just want to give a lot of credit where credit is due to my yoga background and this water balloon accordion stuff from Leslie Kaminoff, because it really is. I walked straight up to him the first time I learned it after a class and I said, Leslie, I'm going to teach this to all the voice teachers. And he said, you have my blessing. So wow. I'm so glad that you like it as much as I do.
That was a wonderful thing that you did share, because it was an explanation that has been able to cross over. I teach all levels, and I have people with vocal dysfunction as well that I work with an ENT group here in Albany, New York.
Yeah.
And it's just made it so clear to them. They have a way of understanding why their body's changing shape, why everything happens in the order that it happens, and why it's necessary to use that support. And it just gave them another way to look at it. And sometimes we can say it 1,000 different ways, but all it takes is one really good way. And I really appreciate the materials being passed forward. Thank you.
My pleasure. And that also just requires then reiterating that everything I offer, take it, teach it. It is to pass forward. That's exactly right. And, you know, I've shared this stuff, you know, I obviously in this context, a lot of the people who are drawn to my work online are voice professionals of some sort. But just to share with all of you, I've taught this to rooms full of like middle school age, high school age students, and especially I spend a lot of time teaching university age students at the New York Film Academy. I've been teaching there for the last 6 years. And I have rooms of people who have never even thought about their breathing, are not singers, even might be their first time ever trying acting. And I go into this level of depth with them because I believe that we ought to know this stuff about our body and how our voices work. Because if you think about it, when we're born, we go, wah, we make some sound, and no one sits us down and goes, pause button. Let me explain to you how your vocal cords work, right? No one ever says to us, okay, so this is how the whole system works, and if it ever stops working, here's how to troubleshoot it. No one ever does that. A year and a half later-ish, when we start making speech sounds and forming more language, a year later, et cetera, whenever it happens for us, right? We do get a lot of instruction just with our parents' faces making big, you know, speech faces in front of us. And we actually get we have a lot more sensation, nerve ending wise, with our faces and our speech mechanism than we do in our larynx and in our torso with all of our respiratory stuff. A lot of that is innervated in an autonomic, involuntary way. So it really requires more understanding to embody how it actually works most effectively.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I have a new 4-month-old granddaughter.
Congratulations.
I watch a few mornings a week, and I'm just watching her, like you said, since you had brought that point up before that nobody taught you or put you on pause, and I'm watching this whole thing through fresh eyes. You know, it's really interesting to see the all of a sudden her recognizing, wow, I have a voice.
I have a voice. Yeah.
Yes, it's really so cool.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Maureen. Thank you.
Thank you for doing what you do.
My pleasure.
All appreciate it. Thank you.
And you know, one other thing to say too about the baby thing that Maureen just brought up is that sometimes we do use this idea that like babies are perfect models of breathing. And if you watch a baby, they are doing this low abdominal engagement thing. Like their whole torso is supporting sound moving up and out. They haven't gotten to the place where someone told them that they have to be good if they want a chocolate chip cookie yet. So they haven't started holding back. But babies are not perfect models, and we don't necessarily want to put them on a pedestal and be like, you were perfect as a baby and now you suck, right? Because babies their spines are very different consistency. If we had heads in proportion to our bodies like babies do, it would be very different than it is. So babies are not perfect examples, is I guess part of it. For those of us who maybe are like, you know, think of like, if we could just go back to breathing like babies, it's not quite that simple, right? Luann, I realized that I actually can just unmute you myself if you would like. Oh, and Maria, yes, you know what? Maria's entering the coupon code right now. It's on the sales page, but actually I think I had the moment as I was sharing with you where I was like, oh shoot, I forgot to do it before the webinar started. So if you give me 5 minutes after the webinar, I'll activate the coupon code so it's there for you. And again, the coupon code, by the way, is FASTACTION20, okay? And that's all caps, by the way. Coupon codes are always all in caps in my system. Luann, in just a second, I'll be able to unmute you, but Gustavo, I see that you have a question too. So I'm gonna go ahead and put you in the docket to become a panelist. And then Luann, I'll just unmute you if you wanna say anything specific. Or maybe it's not working still, huh? I guess it really doesn't wanna work. That's okay. Okay, well, I'll take what you said at face. Oh no, there it goes. Go ahead. That's it, it worked.
Oh, great. Okay. I'm just really enjoying the webinar, and for me, it's kind of affirming because I teach in a non-major program, non-music major program.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of it as far as the vocal department goes. So I'm just really, you've given some great visuals to use. But I know when Gustavo was talking about the upper tension that might happen as you're starting to think about the lower abdominals, I was lucky enough to work with a voice teacher by the name of Irene Gabrud, who is paraplegic and is really into body connection, I think, because of that. And there was an exercise that she showed me that engages the lower abdominals, which is to sing, especially ascending scales that are going higher and higher as you're standing against a wall and you're doing a very, very slow plie down the wall. So you've got that support behind you. It's kind of any kind of upper tension that could come in, and yet by doing the mere action of that plie, slowly you're engaging, as long as you're not doing the ballet pull-up, you're engaging those lower abdominal muscles quite naturally. So it was just an idea that I thought I'd share.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's great. And I think it speaks to the thing we were talking about with Gonzo too, about just teasing things apart, like finding tricks and ways to engage the whole body that helps you tease apart things that want to work together in less helpful ways, right?
Yep.
Awesome. Good. Thank you for sharing that.
Love what you're presenting tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I realize I have one more question. There's a lineup of questions, so I'm going to keep going up till 9 o'clock. And I also had one more question that I actually included in an email that came in from Ada. So let me address Ada's question. And then Gustavo, Gustavo, let's have you first, and then we'll do Ada's question. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, I was wondering about your opinion. What do you think about this invert motion that is in so many old Italian books on singing, where very, some of the old Italian great singers praise like their methods of breathing, which is actually the opposite what we normally do physiologically when we sleep or breathe or talk. Actually sucking in your stomach during inhalation and let your stomach go when you start singing, and thinking of a kind of a inward sighing, right?
Yeah.
Just to address operatic singing and projecting over an orchestra, which will be the opposite of like a pop singing or speech where you want to move the breath forward. They are actually talking about pressing, the concept of appoggio in Italian school, where you press the breath against your sternum arch as a means to control the air power or a loose breath from hitting your vocal cords in heavy singing, where you can really control the breath power on that manner, basically. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's okay. So there's a lot of very smart, opera, like there's a whole lineage of stuff that I certainly don't want to contradict and say, it's wrong. I don't think it's wrong. I think that it is creating some isometric drag on the system. And I think that it can create excess tension. So if we go to a different pattern than the one you're describing, which almost always comes up when I'm having some version of this conversation, which is rib reserve, where people, and it kind of is similar to exactly what you're describing. Rib reserve is the idea that really stems out of a similar operatic tradition where we are holding the intercostal muscles engaged in order to keep the ribs expanded, and we don't let them float down on the exhalation. I think that can create some isometric pressure, and I think most people don't have the subtle engagement to be able to do that super effectively, I think it's very problematic for a young student to try to negotiate that when they haven't found ease in the most simple pattern first.
Oh, it makes sense. Yeah, yeah. Particularly with young singers. No, I mean,
Yeah.
when I'm
Now,
talking about people that, yeah, and so putting the question in a different way, how you will address a professional opera singer where that is really blowing excessive amount of air and singing heavy parts and going through like 100 and something pieces orchestra in a big house.
Yes. Okay. So let's say there's a singer who comes to me because they're experiencing a lot of vocal fatigue and tension and having issues and not being able to perform. And I notice that they're doing this pattern of pulling the stomach in during inhaling, which is sort of the rib reserve, and then letting the stomach go while exhaling to create that isometric pressure. I would very gently take them through the exploration that we did today in order to help them understand that like this really truly is how your body most optimally functions. Can we find some sort of middle ground? Because the truth is, yes, you're getting a very powerful sound by blowing through so much air through your vocal cords and letting your vocal cords overly engage to press back against that airflow. But there is an easier way to probably achieve the same sound that's not going to blow out the system so intensely.
Okay.
So I would just sort of try to find the middle ground, if you will. I don't know if you're actually dealing with someone, I assume you are, who, practices or believes this technique, or whether it's you.
Yeah, but basically what happened is that I'm using the technique, the inverted breathing motion, and I find it very useful to sing, like 2.5 hours opera, not getting tired, like really putting my torso to withhold the whole tension. Whether before I used, the normal, the physiological way of exhaling, breath as an arch going out through my mouth, and particularly going into high tessituras or loud singing, I won't say that I will blow my vocal folds, but almost. I will get very tired or will push my throat up, which actually we're trying to keep it low in operatic singing, right?
Yeah, sure. Your larynx is going higher. So I would, the other thing I would do as you play around with this too, is you could simply just really do a good full body warm up and cool down afterwards. Just make sure that your whole body's not getting rigid, because that's one of the most important things too, is that if we are doing something more athletic with our vocal practice, as long as we warm up and cool down and sort of set ourselves back to neutral, and I'm talking about the neutral that we discussed earlier, which is like a dynamic neutral, then that can actually go a long way in allowing us to do something less, I'm not even gonna say less healthy, but just more athletic. Do you know what I mean? Like I also, the voiceover actors on the call, you can use this technique to scream better. I haven't even explicitly said this yet, but it is really, really important to have this flow of energy behind yourself when you're screaming. If it's just coming from your throat, you're going to get really tired, right? So now, can you still scream and do these jobs? Yes, but it's just that if we do the thing that's not as ideal, then we want to go back to the more easy, ideal pattern before and after to help our body at least have a chance to release and rest.
Gwen, very good. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for asking. I appreciate a question where you're challenging. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. And Bill, I see you say that please consider adding that in long form VO, like audiobooks, the inhalation should be through nose and mouth, sometimes called silent breathing. Ooh. So Bill, actually, I'd be totally interested to have this conversation with you, because I actually advocate for a silent inhalation through the mouth. And I do teach that in both classes, and I can go more into it. And if you have a question about it, actually one of the easiest things to do is go onto YouTube to my tense and release but backwards exercise video, and I explain it a little bit there. But I'm in the same boat with you as far as silent breathing, for sure. I'm gonna come back around to that, Bill, in case you wanna chime in and say something more about it. But I just, in the meantime, want to, in our remaining minutes, make sure that I share with you the answer to Ada's question. And Bill, just type in the chat box if you want to say anything more about that with me. So Ada's question was, that she's watched the video of Kapalabhati, which is a fancy yoga term for how we can do a certain pattern of breathing. And Kapalabhati is another way to sort of reinforce the breathing pattern, okay? So essentially, the way it works is that and you would normally be sitting for this, but what you do is you go, so it's the same as the let it go exercise, but I'm going out through the nose. It's also known as the breath of fire, okay? I'm gonna have to wipe my nose after I do it. There is a YouTube video for Kapalabhati that I will link in the email that I sent to you afterwards so you can learn more about it. But Ada's question about Kapalabhati was that you push the air with your low belly, but how does that relate to singing? I guess I have to do it more subtle, but how much do I need to move my low belly that much in the exercise for high notes? So the truth is, Ada, once you listen to this whole webinar, I think the question's to some degree going to be answered for you. But basically, the reason I like Kapalabhati is because it is reinforcing the same flow of energy from the bottom up and out pattern. So it's just another way to tap into that pattern. Now, do I think it's necessary for us to always use a ton of energy with the low belly coming in like that? No. I think it's totally possible for it to be much subtler when it can be subtle, when we're not saying as much, with as much force, and can be more powerful when it's something like a high note. So you can play a little bit with, now that you understand everything from today, allowing yourself to go back to the Kapalabhati exercise through the nose and see if you can make that connection of how much it needs to be. Okay. Bill, looks like you're all good, I think, as far as that question goes. I mean, part of the reason I'm not going more into it is because it's a whole can of worms and maybe another webinar. I'll put it on the docket for the next one. But let me just say, first of all, for those of you who have been on the line the entire time, I'm so delighted to have shared this time with you. And thank you for being here with me and for all of this. So if you would like to continue working together, as you know, there are opportunities to join one or both of the fall online classes. So How Your Voice Works starts on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday the 7th. It's all very quick. We're just getting started. And Vocal Health for VOs starts on Wednesday on November 8th. So I will send you all the information in the follow-up email along with this recording. And if you just give me about 5 minutes now, Maria et al., I will activate that coupon code. I'm sorry, I forgot to press go on that before the webinar. And Bill, I see your note. And yes, I've been aware of your work for a while, so I'm so glad that you're here, and thank you. Let's have a nose and mouth debate. I'd actually love to have that. I mean, I don't even know if it'll be a debate or we'll come around to being like, yeah, we totally agree. But yes, that sounds great. I'd love to, as a LaSac teacher to a Fitzmaurice et al. Teacher, and I know your VO and et cetera, have that conversation. So I'll send you an email. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everyone who is watching this later on. Thank you for watching this webinar. It is my pleasure to be working with you today. And if you want more information about my work when you're watching this in the future, you can go to voicebodyconnection.com, which is in fact where you'll find the links to the sign up for all of the classes now. Okay, thanks everyone. Have a great night. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Bye-bye.